Hello everyone, and welcome back to Conspiraseed. This week, we'll be talking about the Yerba Buena Cult, a deranged and dangerous cult that was in Yerba Buena, Mexico. What actually led me down this path is I saw this meme. That being said, we're in for a ride today, so let's get into it. The year is 1963. It's a May day like any other when 14-year-old Sebastian Guerrero was exploring some caves near Yerba Buena, Mexico. He had heard many legends of gold and hidden treasures in the caves, as had many others before him. As the sun sets, he sees flickering lights coming from a cave nearby. As he got closer to investigate, he started to hear sounds of people and smell incense. He was cautious to stay hidden as he drew near the mouth of the cave. Slowly peeking in, he saw a scene too terrible to believe. Now let's rewind a few months to late 1962. The brothers Santo and Cayanto Hernandez had an idea to get rich quick. The brothers were known scammers around the more populated areas of Mexico, so they had to find a new area to scam in. They traveled to the isolated community of Yerba Buena, a mostly illiterate village of about 50 people. When the brothers arrived, they proclaimed themselves as prophets and high priests of the powerful and exiled Incan gods, using sleight of hand tricks to convince the villagers. They said that the Incan gods, in exchange for worship and tributes, would grant them hidden treasures in the caves of the mountains surrounding the town, and that they would claim authority over the ancient kingdom and punish the non-believers. The brothers were ignorant of both Incan mythology and pre-Hispanic history, however, as the Incans inhabited Peru and not Mexico. Despite this, the brothers managed to convince the inhabitants of the small town of their lies. The brothers were able to found a relatively large sect, demanding both economic and sexual tributes from both male and female members. They also hosted orgies in the caves, ingested many drugs, and even sold their followers into sexual slavery. They sought out the girls that they thought were the prettiest, despite the age of some of these women being as young as 14. The brothers told the girls' parents that the girls needed to be given to the brothers to learn about sex, and the parents willingly gave their children, as this was the word of the gods. The brothers were living like kings, as this small group of villagers didn't have much to give other than their service. For the first little bit, the cult was ran with no issues. However, at one point, their followers began to grow skeptical. The skepticism among the community was growing, as the brothers that they believed to be high priests failed to fulfill their promises. The brothers brainstormed ideas on how to fix this for a while, eventually landing on using a woman to reincarnate a goddess. They told their followers that they were going to the mountains to talk to their gods, and would be gone for a few days. Instead, they went to the town of Monterrey in search of a prostitute who wanted in on their scheme, eventually meeting a 16-year-old prostitute by the name of Magdalena Solis, and her brother, who was also her pimp, Elazar, who agreed to participate. Magdalena had been forced into prostitution at the age of 12, but also had a side hustle of being a medium and a fortune teller, claiming to channel the spirits of long-dead witches. After they made their way back to Yerba Buena, they hid Magdalena and her brother for a few days before revealing her at one of their rituals. The ritual was going as normal, when through a flashy smoke screen trick, they revealed Magdalena. Once revealed, they claimed that she was the reincarnation of the goddess Coatlicue. The followers of the cult were convinced, and eventually, Magdalena herself began to believe that she was the goddess reincarnated, taking command of the cult from the brothers. Now, a girl who was formerly abused, forced into prostitution on the streets, was head of a whole town. The brothers were still allowed to be high priests of the religion, but had very little say as to what happened in the day-to-day, much to their detriment. Under Magdalena's rule, everything took a darker turn than it already had. Villagers were given peyote, even against their consent, making them susceptible to her commands. She insisted that not only should they perform animal sacrifices, but they should drink the blood to gain immortality. She also demanded that the villagers engage in incest and bestiality during their orgies. By the time Magdalena took control of the cult, 2 of the followers were whispering about wanting to leave, saying that they were fed up with the sexual abuse. Other members of the cult, fearing repercussions, went to the brothers and Magdalena, expressing their concern about the 2 members. Magdalena decreed the 2 unfaithful followers heretics and demanded that they be sacrificed. The cult got together and lynched the 2 unfaithful followers. It's at this point that things really start to spiral out of control. Instead of animal sacrifices, she insisted that their rituals include human sacrifices, and anyone who disobeyed would soon find themselves on the altar, ordered to be beaten, burned, and hacked to pieces by the believers. As Magdalena at this point truly believed that she was an ancient Incan goddess, she began to copy ancient sacrificial rituals, cutting the hearts out of her victims while they were still alive, as well as drinking their blood for immortal life. Now we cut back to the beginning of this video to poor Sebastian Guerrero, who was just peeking around the mountains and caves for treasure. As he peeked around the corner of the cave, he saw many of the Yerba Buena villagers, nude, having an orgy, and drinking a dark liquid from a ceremonial chalice. As he looked past that, to the far end of the cave, he saw where the dark fluid in the chalice came from. On an elaborate altar, there was a human, hacked to pieces, with the final drops of the blood being collected in chalices. Standing above them all was Magdalena, holding the bleeding heart of the man on the altar. Now, of course, Sebastian did what anyone in his situation would do, and ran to the nearest town with a police station, Villagran, which was more than 15 miles away. When he got there, he told police what he saw, but still in shock from what he saw and the exhaustion of running 15 miles, all he could get out was that there were vampires. The police laughed him off, thinking that it was his imagination or even a prank. Sebastian insisted, however, that something terrible was happening in the caves near Yerba Buena, and the next day, the police inspector Luis Martinez said that he would follow the boy to the caves himself to see. Sadly, this would be the last time that either of them were seen alive. After a few days had passed without anyone seeing Sebastian or Louise, the local police went to the state police to ask for help. On May 31st, 1963, the state police, who brought a contingent of the army, arrived at Yerba Buena to find the missing men and find out exactly what was going on in the town. The police found Magdalena, her brother, and Santos Hernandez in a farmhouse high off their faces and in possession of a large amount of cannabis. The police were able to arrest Magdalena and her brother without incident, but Santos Hernandez attempted to flee. The police shot him dead at the scene. The rest of the villagers, seeing the mass of armed forces descending on their village and arresting their goddess, holed up in the surrounding caves. The villagers and police engaged in a shootout, but the few poor, brainwashed villagers were massively outgunned. Those in the town who survived the shootout were taken into custody. With the shootout done, the police and army searched the area and found the bodies of Sebastian and Louise on the property of the farmhouse where Magdalena had been living. Their hearts had been cut out of their bodies, and a search of the nearby caves revealed the bodies of 6 more victims, most of whom were dismembered. The police later found the other Hernandez brother, Cayetano, also dead. It had been found that he was killed by a villager, Jesus Rubio. Jesus had learned of their scam and wanted in on it. When Cayetano refused, Jesus murdered him. Magdalena, her brother, and the other villagers arrested in the raid stood trial. Since none of the villagers would testify against their leaders, Magdalena and Eleazar Solis were only convicted of the murders of Sebastian and Luis, getting 50 years each. The other villagers were convicted of group or gang murder or lynching for the other 6 victims and given 30-year sentences. While the remains of 8 people were found, it's thought that the cult may have murdered up to 16. After this trial, there's not a lot of information on Magdalena or her brother. If she served her full sentence, she would have been released in 2013. However, some reports say that she passed away in prison. The town of Yerba Buena today, despite it being emptied back in the 60s with everyone either being killed or arrested, is a bustling town. It seems to be thriving, as there are about 15,476 inhabitants, with many restaurants, bars, hotels, nightclubs, and even schools. They're putting their dark past behind them and moving forward towards the future. Well, that's it. I learned quite a bit based on this meme that I found on Instagram. So some memes are a good way of getting information. If you liked this video, please remember to like, subscribe, and share the video. I hope you all learned something as well. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with me today. I really do appreciate it more than you'll ever know. And I'll catch you in the next one.